Welcome to the Successful Nonprofits Podcast. I'm your host, Dolph Goldenberg, friend. In today's episode, we are going to be bringing on Mohan Sivaloganathan to talk about reimagining leadership to advance your boldest, bravest impact ideas. As I was preparing for this episode, I was thinking about one of my favorite quotes from Abraham Lincoln. And I'm going to do this from memory, so it might not be perfect, but it goes something like this. The dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate for the stormy present. As our case is anew, we must think anew and act anew. And again, as I was preparing for the conversation today, that just kept rolling through my head because I think very much in the nonprofit sector, and I think also in society in general, that's very true. The leadership that got us to where we're at is not the leadership that's going to get us to where we need to go next. And we might need to cast aside some of those dogmas from that. And by the way, the past always feels quiet, even though it really wasn't all that quiet. But, from what now feels like a quiet past, as we move into what might be a stormier present. And that is one of the many reasons why I invited Mohan to come onto the podcast. Mohan is a keynote speaker, a coach, and by the way, a recovering nonprofit chief executive. And one of the things he puts in his bio, and I want to make sure I say this, above all, he's a proud father, husband, son, brother, friend, and a committed challenger of the status quo. Friends, we strip out the video, so you can't see what is behind Mohan right now, but he's got lots of really awesome drawings from his child right up there behind him. And so it's also one of the ways that I know that he really is a very, very proud father. Now, I'll share with you just last week, and when I say last week, I mean the week before we recorded this episode, Mohan also had a TED Talk that was released, and it was titled The Breakthrough Power of Young Leaders. I also watched that TED Talk in preparation for this conversation, and it's well worth your time to watch it as well. Mohan earned the nickname the Batman of Social Impact as an executive leader by day and a keynote speaker and hip-hop artist by night. Throughout his career, Mohan has supported local and national organizations in orchestrating sustainable transformation and systems change. Mohan is the founder of Harmonious Leadership, which is a movement to really rewrite the rules of leadership and social change. So with that, I'm just going to say, Mohan, welcome to the podcast.
Dolph, I gotta say, thank you. I feel like you gave me all the feels from that intro. I don't know how much higher we can go from here. So thank you for the very kind introduction. Happy to be here.
Well, I feel confident we're going to go a lot higher because so far I've been the only one who's speaking, and together we're going to go much, much further. I thought a good question to kind of open our conversation up with. I know you refer to yourself as a recovering nonprofit chief executive. And what did you discover when you first became that nonprofit CEO?
Oh boy. I'll tell you, becoming a CEO, and I share this with folks a lot who are maybe like number two in their organization, they're thinking about becoming a CEO. It is a choice that you make. It is a choice. You don't just fall into a CEO or executive director position, but you are making a decision for yourself. And that is the biggest thing to come to grips with upon becoming a CEO, is recognizing what are the implications of that choice? What does it mean for your personal life, for your professional life? What does it mean for your family? What does it mean for your community? You lose your cover in so many ways. You're the first one to catch a lot of the arrows. Now, in some places, you actually then also wind up getting a lot of credit and praise that maybe you don't deserve. But your set of peers and allies is much shorter now. So you might have spent a lot of your career being able to find other people that you could vent to about, the higher ups or wherever it might be. Who are you going to vent to now? There's no one there. There is no one there. And there's pressure that comes with that. There's weight that comes with that. And I know all of those experiences while acknowledging that I was aware of many of those things. And I still wanted to make that choice. I still wanted to make that decision. And I felt like it was right for me. And even though I describe myself as a recovering CEO now, absolutely it was the right decision for me. I felt so fulfilled. Like there was really nothing like being a part of shaping a new organizational culture where people could thrive in unique and dynamic ways, and receiving these ideas I never would have imagined, but just serving as an ally, serving as jet fuel for other people's genius. and helping them to be in that zone of genius more often. And the stories I'm the proudest of are like just seeing the trajectories of the incredible people I got to work with and just playing some small role in how they were taking off in their lives and in their career. And that is something you're uniquely able to do as a CEO. It's like you're able to see the big picture and really get into the trees within the forest. And I don't think every role gives you that type of visibility. It doesn't always give you that type of room, or even just give you the opportunity to reflect on that and to lean into it.
I think you're absolutely right. Like many of us, and I know this was true of me in the first time I was a nonprofit executive director. I remember stepping into the position thinking I was 100% ready. Before I hit record, I was sharing with Moen that I just got COVID for the first time since the start of the pandemic. And I started to reach that point where it's like, oh, maybe I'm immune. And now, by the way, I'm actually have a COVID rebound. But I kind of think of myself the same way. I had that hubris the first time I came an executive director. I'm like, yeah, I'm ready for this. And then 3 weeks into the role, I was like, oh, maybe I'm not ready for this.
Yep, yep. Oh, I mean, the moments of self-doubt will come repeatedly. And I think it's an interesting thing where you have to do this dance between real confidence and clarity in who you are, your values, the values of the organization, because you are the ultimate steward of the values of the organization, not just the execution and the strategy, but the values, while also recognizing there's so much you don't know. And to be humble enough to recognize that, to constantly be learning and to be growing. And I know for me, when I'm hiring folks on my team, one of the things, or probably the top priority that is on my mind, is having a growth mindset. And that's something that I hold myself accountable to, and then also the teams I work with, because we're in the state of constant change and constant flux. So if you're a CEO who is so confident that you believe I have all the answers, you're going to fail. But then also, if you are so humble that you're basically just there to be a glorified messenger, then also I don't know why you're in the CEO role. Like, you need to be able to bring something forward and to the table and recognize that for many, in relative to many folks in the organization, you're probably going to be in the organization longer than them. Like, you're going to have people who are there for maybe just 18 months, 24 months, but CEOs oftentimes are there for years. And you're seeing through multiple strategic plans, through multiple election cycles, multiple grant cycles. So there's something you have to be able to hold on to throughout the course of that journey.
So you said a couple things that I want to unpack. The first you said is when you hire, you really look for a growth mindset. Talk to me about that growth mindset.
Yeah, I think with the growth mindset comes curiosity. Humility comes with that. A disposition towards innovation and disruption comes with that. So I'm not necessarily looking for folks who can come and say, "Hey, I have the best idea out of the gates, and here are all the things I've been published for," and so on. What I want to know is, when things got challenging, when things got really complex and they were confusing, how did you approach that situation? Like, how did you up your game? How do you continuously up your game? I'm always interested in talking with folks who are constantly like reading and watching talks and having conversations with people, because they're always feeling like, hey, there's more knowledge, there's more wisdom for me to be able to tap. And even if you failed or made mistakes 9 times, what did you do the 10th time? The fact that you kept coming back and you kept taking a shot on something, you kept iterating, you kept adjusting, that 10th time was probably where the magic happened. And those are the stories that I'm the most passionate about. And I feel like that is the reality of the highest performing organizations, is that you don't just win on the first shot. Like, it's going to take a lot of time in the gym, before you get to that gold medal.
So, Moen, I've got to ask, the vast majority of us know the right answer to those interview questions. It's essentially the same song that we sang when we were little kids, the Itsy Bitsy Spider. So like we know that that's the right answer. How do you vet and screen to go beyond just, okay, you gave me the right answer?
Mm. Well, what I like to test for is, sometimes in real time, which I'll admit, like, I think has perhaps put some undue pressure on people. Like, I've been trying to like ease up on my interviewing style over the past several years, from someone who people used to say was like really intense and had no idea what was going on, to being just much more just human centered in the approach. So I'm still working at that. But sometimes in real time, throwing in new variables. So you might ask a question about, all right, hey, maybe when you worked on something and it was a challenge, how did you overcome that? Okay, kind of a standard interview question, right? Maybe follow up with a variable like, okay, so that's what happened. What if hypothetically the CEO of the organization came and said, actually, your budget for that project is cut by 50%? Then what might you do? So I might ask something like that. I might ask something like, you brought this idea to your community. What if people still didn't like it? Like you thought you'd overcome the challenge, but actually, no, they still don't like it. Like now, what are you going to do? Or the city council just passed a new bill that you didn't expect, and that completely throws things into a loop. Now, what do you do? Like I think it's not just about like can you think on your toes, but again, do you have a disposition towards learning and getting more information? Like do you go and connect with other people? Do you go and do research online? Like are you utilizing AI tools? Like whatever it might be, so that you can be able to up your game. I mean, those are some of the things that I love to be able to have conversation with people about, within interviews.
And I know you said that that can feel really intense to the interviewee. How do most people respond?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, people, they roll with it to the extent that that they can, right? Yeah, I would say that, I've seen a spectrum of folks in those types of contexts. I've seen some folks who would just say, you know what, okay, I take it on the chin and I just move on. And that's it. I've seen some people who are very bold. No, what I was saying was the right way to go, and I'm going to keep fighting for it. And honestly, like both ends of that spectrum can make sense. Like I understand where somebody might be coming from on both sides there. Like maybe like you're doubling down on yourself, and you're confident in who you are and what you're saying. There's power in that. And sometimes you just have to recognize, you know what, like I got to take the L today, and I got to keep it moving. I got to keep the show moving. But then I've also found like there are a lot of folks who are sort of in between. Okay, like let me make an adjustment here. Like how can I be able to make a tweak and like maybe thinking creatively on the fly. And I just believe that we're in a space right now, particularly with respect to social impact, but even many major corporations right now, where the answers of yesterday are not the answers of tomorrow. So you have to be agile. You have to be nimble and to be able to think on your feet. And I think the more that we can be able to understand your approach to some of those complex challenges, I think the better we can be able to see, like, is this someone who could really be able to succeed in today's workforce?
So I'll share with you during the interview process, there's some things that I will do almost intentionally. Actually, you know what? I need to be honest. There's no such thing as almost intentionally. There's some things that I will do intentionally that's to push back on answers, literally just so I can understand how that candidate deals with somebody pushing back on them. And an example I'll give you, there's a couple of very common interview questions. One of them is, tell me about a time you had a disagreement with a supervisor or a coworker or whatever and how you managed it. And so often how people answer that question is they'll say, oh, well, when I have a disagreement with my supervisor, I do A, B, C, D, E. But it's kind of that clinical, textbook answer. Oh, here's what I would do. And so the way I'll often push back on that is I'll say, I might not have communicated that well. I was asking for a specific example, and I'd like to hear the story.
Yeah, this story, I think that's kind of a tale as old as time, right? Just how important it is to be able to get into the story of what happened. Like, where were you? What was the need that you were addressing? Then what did you actually do? And what came from that? Right? Like what were the results? What were the outcomes? And I think it's interesting, for folks who are being interviewed, to be able to find that right balance between hey, here's like lived experience. And this was true. This was something that proved to be effective. This represents me in a real way. And I have a certain framework or methodology that enables me to be able to navigate situations like that. There is an anchoring I'm able to come back to. And I believe that especially for senior leaders, it's important that you have both sides of that. Like, I think you need to lean on your track record, but also you're going to be thrown into these complex situations over and over again. So what is it that you're going to rely on in those moments? Is it a set of frameworks, values, principles, methodologies? I think that's important to be able to communicate out there. But if you only have one or the other, again, especially as a senior leader, I think you're going to have blinders in navigating in an organization.
The other way that I push back in interviews, and it's a common question, although we often now don't ask it, is what is your greatest weakness? 30, 40 years ago, that's how it was asked. But we'll often ask it like, how do people misunderstand you or something like that? And people will say, oh, people often don't understand that sometimes I just try too hard. Like, what's my greatest weakness? If my answer to that question is I try too hard, that seems more like a humble brag than a greatest weakness. And so how I'll often push back when I get that I try too hard answer is I literally will then just follow up and say, well, in what ways does that trip you up?
Yep.
It's like, okay, if you're really going to tell me that's your greatest challenge, okay, why?
Right. I love that because I think what that compels is a deeper level of self-reflection, which is important. And what I'd say is also to be able to pair that with a certain tone or a certain context in terms of how does the interviewer operate and how does the organization operate. I think it's vital for organizations to be truly congruent in terms of what they say, how they operate, how does it feel, and to make that clear in every touch point possible. So if you're looking for a certain level of vulnerability with a question like, yeah, what is your greatest weakness, greatest opportunity area, what trips you up? I think it's also important then as an interviewer, as an organization, to make it clear that, hey, this is a safe place for vulnerability. Because I think a lot of folks might step into an interview and say, wait a second, if I reveal what truly scares me, what I truly struggle with, like they're going to cut me out. Like they don't want to hear that. They want to hear a superstar because that's how we've been conditioned for so long that everybody has to show up with pure strength, pure force all the time. In some organizations, they're still stuck in the past where that is indeed what they're still looking for. When the reality is that the most effective workplaces right now, the most effective cultures, they do lean into vulnerability. There was actually a study that came out some time ago that said the number one leadership trait was vulnerability. So if that's what you're looking for in an interview, then I think, yeah, as an organization, like how do you make that clear on your website? How do you make that clear in terms of how you talk about your values, even as an interviewer stepping into the meeting to be willing to share that? Like I think even for you to be able to be willing to say, hey, yeah, like I'm dealing with COVID and like here's what it's meant for me. Like I think that sets the energy in the right place for people to be honest and transparent as opposed to like this facade of just like relentless strength. And this definition of strength that I don't think is even actual strength. It was just like, kind of built in somebody's mind in some power structure. And then that's just been perpetuated, for generations.
I love that you're pivoting to this other really important part of reimagining leadership, which is something that's always been true. The mirror is actually more turned at us as nonprofit leaders than it is on everybody else. So, I know I was just talking about, hey, what do we do when candidates don't fully answer a question or maybe even are not fully forthright in answering a question? Our teams know when we're doing that. Like we might think we're getting away with it, but we're not.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's another one of those things to what you talked about earlier in terms of becoming a CEO is that people are always paying attention. They are always paying attention. I remember one of my mentors taught me once that as a leader, you're always doing one of two things. You are leading change or you are saying that things are okay. And I just found that to be such a powerful way to think about like the actions of leaders and the effect that it could have on people. And you just may not always recognize that, hey, for me saying something right now, I am either giving permission or I am initiating some sort of change that needs to happen in the organization, or by me not saying anything at all, I am sending a signal to people in terms of something that needs to change or something that needs to remain the same. And I'll admit, like I think that could be exhausting for executives. I think that could be really tiring to know that like your antenna always has to be up. And I built more and more comfort with that in being a CEO. And then sometimes like having a conversation with someone and they're like, yeah, we're doing this thing now because like you said this thing back in this like, oh wow, okay, like you were paying attention. Got it. Like you didn't say anything at that time, but like here we are a few months later, and like now here are like the ripple effects of it. So that really is something to lean into.
And I think everything we do as the chief executive is really amplified. And so, for example, if we're demonstrably showing anxiety before a board meeting, every team member who sees us before that board meeting is like, oh, don't know what's about to happen there, but Dolph's about to have a rough board meeting. Whether or not that's true, I might be feeling anxiety about something else. But if that's what I show before I go into the board meeting, oh, wow, everyone's like, ooh, I hope everything's okay. I hope the board's not going to do something we don't like.
Right. Oh, 100%. I think as leaders, something that I talk to folks a lot about is like, how can you gain that consciousness of where you are as a person? And then how is that affecting how you're relating to the situation that you're in? Because yeah, it could be a board meeting where maybe you have the best plan possible. It could be a strategic plan that is well thought out. It is detailed, impeccably researched. It's going to set the organization up on this incredible trajectory for the future. And you are feeling anxious and you are feeling joyful and you are feeling nervous. That is going to affect how you show up. However, I think so many of us like have been in the grind for so long. We've been taught that we have to suppress our emotions. Like we can't go into that level of vulnerability that we just don't even have consciousness of it. So other people on your team might be recognizing, oh, he's really happy. He's high in life right now. Oh, he's really sad. He's really angry. He's frustrated. But if you don't know that for yourself, then you have no idea what kind of impact you're going to have on that strategic plan. You don't know what kind of impact you're going to have on that board meeting. You're just going to have to deal with the consequences later. But if you can start to have like that visibility and understanding and embrace of your mental state, your emotional state, your spiritual state, then you can do the things that are right for you and then be able to navigate those situations in the right way. Maybe it's a change in tactics. Maybe you need to take a walk. Maybe you need to communicate something to someone like, hey, like, here's where I'm at. Can you back me up on this thing? Because this is where I'm at right now. And then ultimately, everybody will win as a result of it.
So, Moen, I have to share with you, I'm almost embarrassed to say this. I think I was a manager for a little over 10 years before I realized, and I think it was a professional mentor that told me that, hey, you should do this. But before I realized that I could go into a meeting, this might be a meeting with direct reports, it might be a meeting with the board members or whatever, but I could go into a meeting and say, hey, I just want to let you know I'm having a really bad day and I might need some grace and some space in this meeting. Now, I can't do it every day. I probably can't even do it every week. But if on occasion I need to do that, it's okay. And it's probably better that I do it. So that way, if I am off in the meeting, or, if I do say things that are not as polished as I might like for them to be, people hopefully do give me that grace in that space and say, yeah, Dolph is having a bad day.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Well, because the reality is that you're not the only one in that room who's experiencing something. And that's just the human reality of where we are right now. And I think that there's this fear, again, of just like how institutions have been built for so long that you create this wall between who you are as a person and who you are as a professional. That, oh, like if we start asking these questions and showing these different sides of ourselves, like, do we now need to become therapist offices? And like, we're never going to get the work done. No, that's not what's going to happen. Like, even just that brief acknowledgement of how you're showing up in that space can actually help to diffuse the tension. It can give somebody else that permission to be able to lean into their voice and to be able to lean into their emotions too. And that was one of my biggest learnings as a CEO, is just how critical it was for me to be able to set that tone and to be honest about how I might be showing up. And I heard this great idea from a mentor of mine, this notion of the clearing round, where what he would do in certain spaces is start meetings with a clearing of like, here's just how I'm coming in to this space right now. I really struggle with getting my kid to school. And so like I'm kind of frazzled right now. Or, I'm experiencing this thing with a family member who's not feeling well, who's maybe in the hospital. So like, here's some of the emotional baggage I'm carrying. Could also be like a high. Like I just went to a concert last night and I'm feeling incredible and the music is still running through my mind right now. And so like I'm a little bit disconnected from what's going on. But just having that clearing round just allows people to just be who they are in the moment. When I think about this notion of harmonious leadership, like that is just such a vital action to take, is to be able to offer something like a clearing round, something like storytelling, even for just a couple minutes, because that can help you then to be able to feel your best and to do your best.
Love the idea of a clearing round. Love it, love it. There's one other thing, Mohan, and I know when we did our pre-recording sound check, we talked about this a little bit. As we reimagine leadership, how can we reimagine leadership where we don't get overwhelmed as the executive director?
Oh, overwhelm. It's been such a sad inevitability of the work for so long. Does it have to be that way? No. No, it doesn't have to be that way. Well, first, of course, if any billionaires are listening right now, try to spread that wealth a little bit, right? Because I think easing up on the financial scarcity would make a massive difference for the leaders who are out there and the organizations who are out there right now. That said, there are a number of things that folks can consider when it comes to thinking about the notion of overwhelm. One is I would just go back to what I was mentioning before in terms of like doing that emotional check, that well-being check with yourself and how you are relating to a situation. I've been in spaces where, I might be navigating, say, a fundraising challenge, which, you know, perhaps was not particularly different from anything I might have navigated, in other spaces or that other organizations might be going through. But if I'm going at it feeling this deep sense of dread and fear and frustration and resentment, that is going to lead to greater levels of overwhelm. And that's happened to me I've been someone who's been in really tough financial situations where like that what that overwhelm winds up doing is it winds up affecting my body. It winds up affecting my time and my mind space. I'd be sitting on the couch at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. researching RFPs. Like you're not going to make money that way. I'm sorry, no matter how much somebody tells you, oh, you got 24 hours in a day and use them all. No, like especially in the social impact space, it does not work that way by just putting in more hours and sitting on the couch in the middle of the night trying to research RFPs. But so much of that came not from the situation, though. That came from how I was relating to that situation. And so I had to do that recalibration for myself. I had to be able to separate and to be able to observe what was happening for myself and observe what was happening around me, which enabled me to take the right steps. And one of those steps, I think the other thing I would highlight is to try to break down the barriers between yourself and other people. We're at our best as a part of a collective. We're at our best as a part of a community. No matter how much in capitalistic society or American society we're told, well, it just comes down to you, that person in the mirror, it's individualistic, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Yes, self-determination is a part of this. And we are truly the most fulfilled and able to thrive and flourish when we are engaging in this journey with other people, when we are on this harmonious wave with other people, so that we're rising together, we're falling together, but it is with a true unity of purpose, as opposed to something that is more transactional or something that is more isolated. So I think a way to be able to combat overwhelm is to engage the people around you in collaboration, in ideation, in allyship, to break down some of those walls that inhibit us from our vulnerability, so that when we can be able to engage in that work together and to be able to go through this journey together, I feel like it doesn't feel quite so intense anymore, because you realize like, hey, this isn't a me problem here. Like we are in this together. But I think the overwhelm, oftentimes it feels like a me problem. And I should be this, I should be that. But like that word should, it can be the enemy. It can absolutely be the enemy. So I think, again, just, relating to the situation in a different way, like through that reflection with yourself and building that circle of support and love around you.
That's awesome. And Moen, I'm really struck by the fact that you also tie that back into who we are as humans. And as you were saying that, I actually did think, yeah, humanity would have gone extinct millennia ago, except we know how to collaborate and cooperate. Like, we are not the biggest, strongest creature on the planet. We just would not have made it. So I'm really glad that you shared that. And now it's time for me to be vulnerable, because it's time to play Two Truths and a Lie, which is a game that I'm not great at. So if you would like to share 3 facts about yourself, 2 of which are true and 1 is a lie, and I'm going to try to figure out which one is not true.
Oh, I like this. I like this. All right, let's see. I once met Jay-Z and tried to give him my music to see if he would sign me. I'm planning to run for office next year. And I once danced on a stage with the CEO of Procter & Gamble.
First, I think the Jay-Z is true. And when we're done, if that one is true, I want to know what happened. I 100% think you're going to run for office next year. Clearly won't be federal level, so probably local or state. But having watched your TED Talk, I don't think you danced on a stage with the CEO of Procter & Gamble.
All right. So the lie is that I'm not planning to run for office next year.
No way.
Not planning to run for office. I did dance on a stage with A.G. Lafley, former CEO of Procter & Gamble, during an intern's talent show where he was sitting in the front row.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Performing on stage, and I pulled him up on the stage with me. In all my infinite wisdom, thought that would be a great idea. And yes, I did in the days of CDs. And like, I don't know who in the audience is going to be with me in terms of this idea of CDs, but in the days of CDs, I did meet Jay-Z after one of his concerts and tried to give him my CD, which was intercepted by one of his other guys. He's like, I'll take this, don't worry about it. And Jay-Z literally said, he's like, I can't take this. I can't take this. But like, he was cool. He gave me a pound like before hopping into his Maybach and driving off.
Wow. Okay. So I guess you never heard from Jay-Z.
I never heard from Jay-Z.
Okay.
Unfortunately not.
Okay.
And so I guess we're calling out a lot of different people who might be potentially listening, right? So like we already talked about billionaires. I guess Jay-Z is in that group. So Jay, if you're listening, fund more social impact work out there, and maybe give me a call, because I'm actually releasing new music soon. And trust me, it's a lot better than when I met you. That was like 20 years ago.
So I've got one more question. Let's bond about CDs for a minute. Now, I actually grew up in the record era, but CDs might have come out when I was in high school. I did not belong to a family that would have had the equipment to play CDs, but I think they probably came out when I was a young adult. So, do you recall the CD service, CD Baby?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, I loved CD Baby. I got so many great CDs off of CD Baby, and I loved their thank you email. I actually saved a copy of it, and every now and then I'll actually send that thank you email to like a development director who's like, Dolph, share with me the best thank you letter you've ever gotten. And it's actually for buying something, it's not for a contribution. Second best thank you letter I ever got.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Wait, so what was the first one?
I feel confident I've told this on the podcast before, but it's been a few years. So the first one, when I stopped being a permanent chief executive, I took 8 months off work, which to be clear, like I had the privilege and the ability to be able to do that, but I took 8 months off work and I had some amazing experiences where I got to go explore the planet. One of those trips was hiking out west here in the United States. And I lost my Nalgene bottle somewhere out west, I think in Zion National Park. And I felt so bad. I'm like, I came out to the wilderness, this beautiful wilderness. And what did I do? I damaged it. I left my bottle. So I decided to make a contribution to Trees Atlanta, which is a local tree planting organization in this city that I live in. I made like a $50 contribution and wrote a letter explaining, this is because I lost my bottle and I feel really bad about it. And here's where I lost it. And, I figured, well, I cannot undo the damage that I did. I could at least do this. I got and again, we're not talking $500. We're not talking $5,000. We're talking $50 or something like that. I got a letter back from someone in their development office, signed by someone in the development office, not the development director, not the executive director, that essentially said, "Dear Dolph." And then it was written from my water bottle to me.
That's brilliant.
It was like, as I float down the Colorado River, I miss you so much.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that.
But Trees Atlanta informed me that you made a contribution in my memory. And, so it goes on and then, explains what that contribution is going to do. And then it says, but please don't lose any more of my friends in the wilderness. We'd rather be with you. That actually was the single best thank you note because it was so personal.
Yeah. And what I can't help but think about, so I love that. And what I can't help but think about is like the person writing it, I would venture to guess this is someone who operates with a transcendent level of joy on a day-to-day basis. There is a level of purpose and giving in how they show up every day that leads to something like this, like something that was so delightful that you're still talking about it today, where tens of hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people are going to hear this story. Like, talk about a remarkable cascading impact from that individual. What is it that they have done to be able to show up that way in their work? And like you said, they weren't a development director, they weren't an executive director, they didn't need a big title in order to do this thing that you were still telling the story about today.
Yeah. And I'll share with you, the person that wrote it, hand wrote a note and signed it and put their title, something like, individual giving manager or something like that. But the other thing that I was so impressed with, this was 10 years ago, it was 2014. Like, talk about handcrafted and bespoke. I mean, today, if someone in a development office wants to do that, they could throw it in a chat. They could throw some bullets in a chat GPT, have a pretty good, witty letter to send in 10 minutes or less. This person really had to take time. They had to pull out a map, or they had to Google a map and be like, okay, what river runs through Zion? And you know what I mean? Like, they really had to think through this.
Brilliant. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I'd not thought about it from the way you have, which is this person is transcendent and brings joy to their work. And you're right. Like, they had to have gotten great joy in writing that letter.
Mm-hmm. And imagine if more teams cultivated that sense of joy in work.
Yeah.
Like, imagine what could be done, right? And how we would, if that happened.
Oh my gosh. All right, Mohan, that almost makes me want to start over and just restart the whole interview. And I'm serious about this. I'm going to have you back on in 6 to 12 months so we can talk about joy at work.
Let's do it. One of my favorite topics. So sign me up.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to make sure that my friends who listen know how to reach out to you. And so, friends, first of all, you can go to Mohan's website. That's harmoniousleaders.com. And one of the reasons to go there, not just find out about what types of services that he offers, but also you're going to get some really inspirational content that will help you rewrite the rules for your leadership and your impact. Additionally, you can also sign up for Mohan's newsletter. And in the show notes, I'm going to put a link to sign up for the newsletter. You can also do that at his website, harmoniousleaders.com. And then finally, I've mentioned that he's got a TED Talk that just came out. I watched it in preparation for this conversation. It is phenomenal, and you're going to want to see it. So we're going to link to that in the show notes. It's successfulnonprofits.com. Mohan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dolph. This is a pleasure.
All right, friends, if you liked this episode, if it helped you think about ways that you could be a different leader or about ways that you could lead differently, there's 2 other episodes I think you are really going to find helpful. The first is episode 289, Leading Authentically with Elena Frank. And the second is episode 335, Thriving as a Nonprofit Leader with Russ Finkelstein. That, my friends, is our show for this week. I hope that you have gained some insight to help you and your nonprofit thrive. And the lawyers make me do it, or I just probably wouldn't ever do this. Here's your disclaimer. I'm not an accountant, nor am I an attorney, and neither I nor the consulting practice provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. And you hear this every week, so you know what that means, right? That means that this podcast should not be relied on for tax, legal, or accounting advice. If that is what you need, find a licensed, qualified professional in your area and get the support that you need. And one final thing, if you listened just beyond the disclaimer, oh my gosh, you're an amazing human being. I'm so grateful for you, and I hope you have a great day.